Are you lonely? Have you lost all your friends? Have you been locked down so long you don't know how to love your mates no more, your buddies, your pals? Friendship, of course, is vital. We obsess about romantic love. We obsess about success in the material world. Friendship can be something we take for granted, but during this period of quarantine and lockdown, we have observed that as social, tribal creatures, we have been denied something normal. How are we going to resume our friendships? What is the importance of friendship in the life of human beings? Let's study it, analyze it, and work out how we can improve the relationships with our friends, particularly if we've lost them because of the old lockdown.
In the 1980s, this guy, Professor Robin Dunbar, calculated just how many friends and acquaintances we maintain in our social groups.
Hello, Robin. I'd like to be friends with him already when I see him perched in a circle in a universe thinking about friendship. It's weird, isn't it, to think that, you know, you might need an exact number of friends. I've had this kind of life now where I've moved through numerous circles because I guess it's my age, man. Like there was points where I was a kid at school and I had that whole set of friends. Then when I was becoming an actor, then stand-up comedy world, I've lived in different countries. I've had whole different lives, different episodes just gone now. Whole houses never visited again. People gone. Episodes just lost in the midst of time. Are there some consistencies? Yeah, there are friends I've had since I was, well, I've got one friend I've had since I was a tiny kid. I've got friends still from when I was a teenager. I suppose what I've noticed because of the death of a very dear friend is that the person that I am in that relationship somewhat goes with them. Now, ideally, we like to think, oh, I'm always the same with everyone, but that's seldom the case because different relationships bring out different aspects in you. That's just probably chemistry, I suppose.
His theory says the average person has 5 intimate friends. That's our closest support group. Then we have 15 best friends, 50 good friends, 150 we call friends, 500 acquaintances, and 1,500 people who you can recognise by sight.
Well, that's dizzying, isn't it? That little spiral of people there. Could you cope living in that cosmos? Because evidently you do. Are you trying to map that onto your own life now? Right, who are my 5 intimate friends? Who are my 15 best friends? Firstly, there's a grammatical or synaptic or syntactic or semantic issue that we've got to deal with here. Best is a superlative and you can only by definition have one best friend. That's just simply the way it is. You remember at school, you're my best friend, this person's a best friend. You remember the friend league tables, don't you? How hotly competed for those roles were. I suppose this as a social instrument is exciting because it shows you that you can actually use data to understand your life. What you can't measure though is the quality of those friendships and to a degree the function of those friendships. Friendship, I suppose, is about, I've got friendships where I can talk in a completely unguarded way, where I'm like, this is who I am. There are loads of relationships in my life where I'm basically on standby, where I'm basically on, I'm not operating at my capacity now because if I talk how I think, you are going to assume that I'm mentally ill and weird because, let's face it, I am. And I suppose the point of those 5 intimate relationships is to be able to wholly be you, to talk about your fear, your shame, your trauma, the deep, like, I'm lucky because, again, of belonging to these tribal groups around addiction, which essentially become mental health support groups and spiritual groups, that I am able to go, these are my worst fears, this is my shame, this is who I want to be, these are my doubts, you know, like all of these things are commonly exchanged in these groups where I think there's a lot of people, I know that I've belonged to friendship sets, we don't even talk about that stuff. And I know a lot of them where people, like where the whole friendship group, like there's movies made about that stuff, right? Where the whole friendship group is just a pose really, where you only talk about ephemera and cultural nonsense. You know, not talking about the true intimate nature of who you are. This is not really about friendship. This is about socializing, isn't it? Like what are the maths of social systems?
Dunbar's research also teaches us that in order to maintain that close circle of friends, they're the ones in that 5 and 15 ring, you need to invest a certain amount of time.
Don't walk your friends down a stairway into a dark tunnel. That's the last place to conduct these kind of relationships. Terrifying Jack the Ripper locations.
For your closest friends, that's contact about once every 3 days. For your best friends, that's once a fortnight.
I don't have that. Do you? Once every 3 days. I'm married, I've got kids, I've got dogs. My best friend is a dog. And let's face it, it's not even a human being. Him, continual contact. I normally can put out my arm and there he is, the lad. But As for human friendships, every 3 days. When I was younger, more contact, but now, not so much.
Each friend has to have a certain amount of time invested in them. So for your very close friends, that's something in the order of about 30 minutes per day.
I like Professor Robin Dunbar, anthropologist and friend Gestapo. Each friend has got to have 25 minutes of dedicated friend time. Perhaps you'll have a cupcake, perhaps you'll wander near a stream, a meadow perchance. Like, it's interesting, isn't it, that these things in this age of data and analysis can be quantified and observed, but you know, there's people that you're friends with where it just sort of doesn't make sense. The same as falling in love. You can fall in love with people and it's just completely irrational. I've got friends that I hardly ever see at all, but when I see them, it's like there's this invisible thread that exists between us that kind of vibrates when I see them. One friend, who's weird, strange person, Paul Foot, I'll say who he is. Like, when I see that dude, it's like something neurologically and anatomically sort of awakens in me that is dormant. Other friends who I don't see at all that make me laugh like nobody else in the world makes me laugh. Friendship is a very, very peculiar and beautiful thing. I suppose what happens is, you know, the requirements of your life change so much because we're not in a battalion or a platoon fighting a war or something. You know, you start to realise, well, look, I've got to look after these people. I've got these obligations. So sort of friendship becomes kind of relegated in your competing set of priorities around spiritual advancement, having a job, looking after the family, all that stuff, no?
The thing about the coronavirus lockdown is we haven't been able to spend that required amount of time with those inner layers to maintain those relationships.
I think there is a degree of underreporting on the mental health problems that have come from the pandemic because of the agenda to promote the objectives of various authorities and governments. Like, you know, if they want people to lock down, don't talk about the mental health stuff. If you want people to do X, don't talk about Y. And it's clear to me that there'll be a rise in addiction and alcoholism. There'll be a rise in people taking their own lives. There's going to be a rise in mental health issues, and it's precisely because of, yes, an issue like friendship. Ultimately, what the anthropologist is talking about, Robin Dunbar, and ultimately, of course, what anthropologists do is try to study, are there indigenous and native conditions to which human beings are naturally inclined, in the same way you would understand don't drink paint, drink water, and don't only eat chocolate, eat a variety of fruits, because we are evolved for these conditions. There are social correlatives that involve, as our man says, certain amounts of time spent with certain types of individuals conducting certain relationships. But beyond that, there are things like meaning, purpose, shared collective ideals. All of these things are discarded by social systems that promote certain values over others and completely neglect things that are necessary, pandemic or no pandemic. Again, the pandemic is an interesting lens to examine human nature because it is a unique moment in time where suddenly rules and practices have altered radically.
It means you kind of may just have to renegotiate your friendships a little bit, just to establish that your friends still are your friends. You haven't found somebody more interesting to talk to.
Who are you going to have found that's more interesting during this period of lockdown hermitude? Alexa, can you fulfill my deepest needs? Alexa, can you understand me for who I am? Alexa, are you going to help me wade through my shame? You're going to help me to find meaning and purpose in a world that has, as your very existence in my household demonstrates, become commodified, where privacy is no longer mine. You can't replace me with a speaker that answers your back.
Instead, we've been spending time with different people. Perhaps they're your neighbours.
It's what neighbours do, isn't it, eh? Pop their heads over each other's fences.
I've not been spending time with the cast of Actually, I have. I was in an episode of Neighbours right at the beginning of lockdown when I was in Australia, just before this stuff all went off, and Toad was in it. Toad Flax. Toad Fish. I liked that guy.
Because we can only retain that number of 15 in our best friend circle, when one comes in, another has to go out.
God, it's brutal, isn't it, in the old best friends circle? It's a real dog-eat-dog world of little green dots.
There's another important aspect to human relationships we've been missing, and that's touch.
These guys' touch is very important. So grooming is a big part of their social environment.
Oh, I love it. Now we're getting into the great ape stuff because, of course, human beings customarily establish hierarchies and comfort through contact, and all these new regulations have come into place as a result of the pandemic. How do we establish intimacy and trust without touch? I mean, of course, language is a very, very powerful tool, eye contact, etc. But the fact is, what has been left unexamined and might only be understood on a personal basis is fundamental rules of how we live our lives have altered without putting safeguards in place for how that change is going to affect us.
And it just kind of releases those happy hormones. It makes them feel good. It's kind of like us having a massage.
And whilst we've been holding back from hugs, handshakes and massages, we've been missing the same endorphin release.
I suppose what this is saying is not only have we lost contact with people that we require in our lives, the friendships that tell us who we are, that make it okay to be us, we've also lost literal touch with other people. This is something we talked about and discussed somewhat at the beginning of the pandemic, and now, if indeed we are approaching something like its conclusion, it's interesting to note that we will be emerging back into the world as different people, that as our man says, we may need to renegotiate some of our friendships to understand how people have changed, to see how we feel about touch now and communication and contact and all of the social protocols, which was, I always thought were a bit weird anyway. 1 kiss, 2 kiss, shake hands, fist bump, elbows now. You know, the whole thing was a baffling array of exchanges, if you ask me anyway. What I think is most important is that on some level we acknowledge that we've been through something very unusual, and we're moving further and further away from the creatures that we have evolved to become, and are more and more dealing with cultural influence, which to my mind is a pose of being a person. Intimate friendships, relationships with people that know you well, are vital. For me, I feel that the way I'll be handling it is by maintaining contact with people that are on the path with me. My path is to awaken from the illusion of self, to cleanse myself of the way this culture has conditioned and distracted and bribed and controlled me through its incentives and its punishments, to become an awakened person, acknowledging what I have evolved from, and that I do have natural impulses and instincts, and that these impulses and instincts have to operate not only in the context of our culture, but in the context of my actual life. And friendship, I suppose, can be good because, for one reason, there are relationships where you can safely explore who you are, where you can receive feedback on who you are, and it's not the sort of crucible of intensity that your domestic life can sometimes feel like, particularly after a time like this. But you let me know what you think about friendship, how your friendships have changed, what it is you're looking for in the comments below. I do read them. Like them if you like this video. Please make sure you subscribe to the Awakening channel. It's an important channel for me. And if you like this content, go over to Luminary and subscribe to that as well. I do a podcast every week where I talk to an important guest about interesting ideas. Plus I do a guided meditation. You can get it on Apple now. Wherever you are in the world, you can get it. So, you know, finally, Jesus. Okay, well, thanks very much for watching that. And, you know, I consider you to be a friend. Turn on the notification bell so I can clang in your head whenever I get a thought cross my mind. Thank you.